words of Sefer Yirmiyahu, and we are up to Perek Lamed Tes, and this is actually a Perek which deals with the actual Churban Beis Hamikdash and the destruction of Yerushalayim, but it does not really give a lot of details about that. It's focusing on Yirmiyahu and what is going on in his life. Perek Lamed Tes begins, Bashana HaTeshiyis l'Tzidkiyahu Melech Yehuda. It was the 9th year of Tzidkiyahu's reign. B'chodesh HaAsiri, in the 10th month, which is Teves, counting from Nisan. Ba Nebuchadrezzar Melech Babel b'chol chelei el Yerushalayim v'yatzuru alav. So this is the well-known idea that the reason why there is a fast on Asara B'Teves is when Nebuchadnezzar, because of Tzidkiyahu's revolt, began a siege around Yerushalayim. So it doesn't say it was the 10th day of Teves, but we know from Yecheskel that this was the 10th of Teves. So it started in the 9th year of Tzidkiyahu's reign, and it lasted until the 11th year. B'ashtei esrei shana l'Tzidkiyahu b'chodesh haravi, and it was in the 11th year of Tzidkiyahu's reign. Right, so for those years there was famine and siege. B'chodesh haravi, in the 4th month, which is Tammuz, b'tisha l'chodesh, the 9th of Tammuz, Hafka Ha'ir, the Babylonians were able to break through the wall of Yerushalayim. So this is well known, that for the Bayis Rishon, the siege began on the 10th of Teves, in the 9th year of Tzidkiyahu, and the walls of Yerushalayim were broken down the 9th of Tammuz, the 11th year. In the Bayis Sheni with the Romans, it was the 17th of Tammuz, and the Gemara says that because we go with the last perennius, we go with the Bayis Sheni rather than the Bayis Rishon. But the Hufka Ha'ir of the Bayis Rishon was on the 9th of Tammuz. And what happened after the city was broken into? So at this point, we're going to have the Churban, right? 3 weeks later, or 1 month later, because 9th of Tammuz to the 9th of Av, is going to be the Churban. Vayu, Kol Sarei Melech Bavel. The officers, the generals, came and entered the city. Vayeshvu b'shara tovach. They sat in the middle gate. Middle gate meaning the main gate that people would enter. And it gives us their names, the Babylonian names. Nargel Sharetzar, Samger Nevo. So these seem to be 3 people, although the Mefarshim have different opinions how you group it together. There was a Nargel, there was a Sharetzar, there was Samgar Nevo, Sarsachim, a 4th person, Sarsachim, Rav Saris, who was a high official, and Nargel and Sharetzar, Rav Mag. So again, Rav Mag, it's machlokas, is that a name or is that a position? The word Mag is obviously a very, very obscure word, but Rav Mag basically means high in position. You'll notice Sharetzar is mentioned twice. There could have been 2 guys with the same name. B'chol she'eris sari melech Bavel. They're entering the city. Imagine the terror. It was more than 2 years of famine and starvation. But now, the enemies are entering. Vayehi, kasher ra'am Tzidkiyahu melech Yehuda v'chol anshi ha'milchama. When Tzidkiyahu sees, as well as his soldiers, that the enemy has entered the city, and obviously, they're going to be coming for him. Vayivrechu. He decided to flee. This is the famous The Gemara is marich in this, the Medrash is marich, that there were tunnels under his palace that would take him, underground tunnels, that would take him far from the city, and he would emerge near Yericho. And he left in the middle of the night through the king's gardens, but this is understood as a tunnel under the king's gardens. And he left in the direction of the gate between the walls, because the wall was constructed of two parts, and the gate between the walls went through the two parts of the wall, but it was all subterranean. He came out on the side of the Judean desert towards Yericho. Now, it says that the armies of the Babylonians were pursuing him, and they caught him. According to the Medrash, he would have escaped. But Hashem made a deer appear, that the soldiers were following the deer to catch the deer. And punct, they arrived exactly at the point that Tzidkiyahu and his family emerged from the cave. This is in the Medrash. V'yasigu es Tzidkiyahu bi'arvais Yericho. Tzidkiyahu was apprehended in the plains of Yericho. Vayikchu Eisai. They took Tzidkiyahu. V'yaluhu el Nebuchadrezzar melech Bavel Rivlasa be'eretz Chamas. Nebuchadnezzar was not in Eretz Yisrael. They took him to the city of Rivla in the land of Hamas, that would be Syria. V'yedaber itai mishpatim. And he was adjudicated harshly as a traitor because he was rebelling against the king. And what did the king do? Vayishchat melech Bavel es b'nei Tzidkiyahu berivla li'enav. The king, Nebuchadnezzar, slaughtered, either directly or through his shaluchim, murdered the children of Tzidkiyahu, li'enav, in front of the eyes of Tzidkiyahu. He saw the deaths, the murder of his children. V'yes kol chayrei Yehuda shachar HaMelech Bavel, and all of the important officers who were with Tzidkiyahu were killed. And then, v'yes einei Tzidkiyahu iver. He didn't kill Tzidkiyahu. He then blinded him. So the last memory Tzidkiyahu would ever have was seeing the deaths of the children. And again, it's not only the loss of his children, but the fact that he is the reason they died. Because if he would have made peace and not fought against Bavel, this wouldn't have happened. V'yes einei Tzidkiyahu iver, v'yasreu b'nechushtayim. He was then bound in copper chains. Lavi Isa Bavela, to bring him to Bavel. At an earlier nevuah, Tzidkiyahu was told, you will be brought to Bavel, and you will die in Bavel, but your eyes will never see Bavel. That is mamash what happened. He was blinded in Rivla. He was brought to Bavel. Now the one bracha was he was not killed, he died. In fact, it says the day after Nebuchadnezzar died, Tzidkiyahu died. And that's why he was given the honor that you will be buried with the glory and kavod that a king is entitled to. And then it goes on, V'yes beis hamelech, the house of the king, the palace, V'yes beis ha'am, and the house of the people, that means houses generally, Sorfu akastim bo'esh, V'yes chaimas Yerushalayim notatzu. Now, I have a very, very simple kasha here. It actually does not mention here that the Beis HaMikdash was burnt, when obviously it was. And in fact, a description of the burning of the Beis HaMikdash, which was mamish at this time, is not mentioned until the very last perek in Yirmiyahu, which is perek Nun Beis. Why would it not be mentioned at this point? Unless maybe we haven't gotten there yet, meaning the city was broken into on the 9th of Tammuz, and this is describing the damage that was done at that time and the days afterwards before you get to the 9th of Av. So when it says they burnt the houses, etc., that is before you get to the 9th of Av, and at that point we have the Beis HaMikdash that is dealt with in a separate perek. But here it says, Beis HaMelech, Beis HaAm, Chomos Yerushalayim, they smashed. Pasuk Tes, V'yeis Yeser Ha'am, Hanisharim Be'ir. And the people that survived, they were not killed by the sword, or by famine, or by disease. V'yes HaNeiflim Asher Naflu Alav, V'yes Yeser Ha'am Hanisharim. And the people who surrendered to Nebuchadnezzar, so they were sent into Golus. They were taken out of the city, meaning they weren't killed, they were taken out of the city. But what's interesting is that even then, some people were allowed to stay, meaning even after the Churban Beis HaMikdash. There was so the first wave of Golus, the Chorish and the Masker, was 11 years before the Churban. Then we have the year of the Churban, which was a Golus of everybody. But even that Golus of everybody, the Dalat Ha'am, the impoverished people who had nothing, little groups of people, they were allowed to stay. And they were put under the rulership of a Jewish governor, Gedaliah ben Achikam. And Pasuk Yud says, Umin ha'am hadalim, the most impoverished people who had no capacity to revolt. Asher ein lahem u'umah, they had nothing. Hishir, this is even after the Churban. Nebuzaradin Rava Tabachim. Right, Nebuchadnezzar is in Rivla in Syria, but Nebuzaradin is the general who was conducting this war. He let the Dalat Ha'aretz stay in Yerushalayim. He's called Rava Tabachim. That literally means the general of the slaughterers. Be'eretz Yehuda, V'yitin lahem kuramim v'gevim beyomahu. He put them in charge of vineyards and wine presses. After all, why should Nebuchadnezzar lose out on the crops and the fertility of the land? You can produce grapes, produce wine. So, even though it says he gave them vineyards, Rashi explains he doesn't give them vineyards. He wouldn't do that. The vineyards belong to the king, but he makes them his workers. Now, the one person that Nebuchadnezzar has a special affection for, paradoxically, is none other than Yirmiyahu Hanavi, because Yirmiyahu Hanavi was the loyalist. Not really. He was saying, surrender to Nebuchadnezzar, surrender. So Nebuchadnezzar gave a special instruction to his general to communicate to Yirmiyahu. And Pasuk Yud Aleph says, Vayitzav Nebuchadrezzar melech Bavel al Yirmiyahu biad Nebuzaradin Rava Tabachim. Nebuchadnezzar himself sent a message to Yirmiyahu through Nebuzaradin, his general. Kechenu, take this man out of his prison, out of Chatzar Matara, v'yeinecha sim alav, and you watch him, be sure that he's protected. V'yal tas loimum, and you certainly should do nothing wrong to him. Ki kasher yedaber elecha kein aseh imai. Whatever Yirmiyahu wants, give him. Vayishlach Nebuzaradin Rava Tabachim. Nebuzaradin, the chief massacre person, and his assistant Nebushazvan Rav Saris, as well as Nargel and Sharetzer Rav Mag, positions of authority. V'chol Rabbi Melech Bavel, that all of these officers came. Vayishlechu, vayikru es yirmiyahu mechatzer matara. They released him. Nebuchadnezzar's men released him from his imprisonment. Vayitnu oso el Gedalyo ben Achikam ben Shaphan. The first time he's mentioned. They delivered Yirmiyahu to the protective custody of Gedaliah ben Achikam, who was the Jewish governor of the poor, shattered remnants of Jews who were allowed to remain in Eretz Yisrael to work the vineyards and the wine presses that Nebuchadnezzar has taken over. So Yirmiyahu was delivered to Gedaliah. Now, V'el Yirmiyahu haya devar Hashem b'yoso atzur b'chatzer matara lemar, and while Yirmiyahu was still in the prison of the Chatzer HaMatara, he was given a message from Hashem. Haleich v'amarta li'Eved melech HaKushi lemar. Go and speak to Eved melech HaKushi. Remember, this is a machlokas. Is this an African black servant, or is it Baruch ben Neriah? But either way, this is the person who saved Yirmiyahu's life by pulling him out of the bore. And now he's going to get a special bracha. Kayamar Hashem tzavakos elokei Yisrael. Hineni mevius devari elira zayis l'ra. Indeed, I am going to carry out my gezerah in a bad way against this city. V'lo l'taiva. V'hayu l'fenecha b'yirmiyahu. And you will be there that day. But my promise to you is, hitzalticha b'yirmiyahu Hashem. You will be spared. And you will not be delivered into the hands of the people that you're afraid of. Those are the Jews who want to kill him. Ki malet amaletcha. I will rescue you. Ubecherev leisipo. V'haisa lecha nafshecha l'shalal. And your life will be your spoils of war. Ki batachta bi. You had emunah and bitachon in me because you trusted my Nevi'im, you believed my Navi, and therefore you were willing to risk your life by protecting my Navi. That is bitachon in Hashem, and for that you will get a great bracha, the bracha of survival.